All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bible study tonight. Bit worn out right now because we've been working on Vacation Bible School, the decorating and setup, building, and all that over this past week. And so, thank you to everybody that's already been out to help this week, and to everybody that's going to come out tomorrow. Tomorrow's one of those days when we're there. Mark and Doug will be there at 10 a.m. and I'll show up about 1 p.m. and I'll work till 7 with anybody that wants to come after work tomorrow on Thursday. And then Friday we'll be there from probably 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then Saturday at 10 a.m. again till whenever we need, just whatever's necessary to get everything done for Sunday. So anyway, let me say a prayer for us and we'll get started. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this evening, and we ask that you'd bless our time together. Join us, lead the Bible study. Let it bring you fruit and change into our lives as your Holy Spirit takes over. And we ask that you would explain the Bible to us tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we are going to be talking about one of the things I think that afflicts us individually and as married couples. It is comparing, to each other, comparing ourselves, our situations, our families to each other, to the people around us, whether it's in our neighborhoods, our coworkers, our family members, and one of the things that stands out to me is this is one of the things that really steals your satisfaction in life, your happiness, your joy, and those are separate things to me. And so for us, when we start talking about this, I need to be able to, I don't think anybody has a hard time everybody's afflicted by this. Everybody deals with this on a daily basis, especially in the United States. And part of it is that our, if it's our values or whatever that we have in our lives in terms of being able to see what's important, all those kind of things. So one of the things that stands out to me is a passage from 1 Kings where we've been reading. And it is 1 Kings 18:19. So in the Old Testament, this is Elijah. And I want you to hear, because one of the things that's been going on is there's been a drought and a famine in the land because of that drought. So there's not been a lot of food. And God tells Elijah, go live out in the wilderness. Now, that is, if I asked you how do we solve the problems of comparing ourselves to the people around us and having issues with jealousy and envy and those matters in our lives, a lot of my friends would say, you got to get off the grid. You get out in the countryside, and they want to go back to like Revolutionary War time where you had your own big plot of land out away from everybody. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that God calls us to be in the world, not of the world. And so being out by ourselves is much, in terms of our testimony, our evangelism efforts and all of that, takes that to a much lower level, I believe. Especially if you don't, if you get away from technology and all that, then you're really out by yourselves, which, some people would say that's a good thing, gets us away from the sinful world and all of that. I do understand when they say that, but he's out there and God is feeding him by having the birds drop sandwiches to him, basically meat and bread in the morning, meat and bread at night, drinking water from the brook, which, doesn't sound real appetizing, doesn't sound like a lot of fun. If Jill said we're going on vacation and this is what we're going to do, I would be like, no, let's just stay here and have pork and beans or something. I don't know. That doesn't sound like something I want to do. And so here we are, and he is in this situation. And then God says, when the brook dried up, he said, go out to a foreign country to the widow at Zarephath, and she'll provide for you. And they had, it's a great mighty miracle where she has oil and flour and they're able to make bread. So she makes him a loaf of bread. And for the rest of the time there's a famine, then he has bread and water, which we would go, woo, bread and water. Yes. All right. No, nobody's going to be rejoicing over that, right? That's not something that is going to get you all fired up. So he's gone from being out in the wilderness now to living in a foreign country. And I've got family and friends who, Jill's got some family that have moved overseas because of the cost of living, cost of healthcare here in the United States. And they just want to see other parts of the world. But I have lots of friends who come up to me and they say, oh, the cost of living to go to such and such country and live so much better. I'm going to retire there as opposed to here because it costs so much less. And they're talking about Southeast Asia or Latin America or, whatever, some little island in the Caribbean. And so there is this idea, that's going to be something better that they've heard about. So then he gets called back. God tells him, go back, go find Ahab, the king, and go talk to him. And he goes back, and when he gets there, there's been this famine, there's been all of this for years that he's been going through. And when he gets back, they have 850 prophets, so 450 prophets of Baal or Baal, and they have 400 prophets of Asherah. So the male god has 450, the female god has 400. But they all eat, it says in 18:19, if we look together, I want you to see the word of God says here. It says, let's start in verse 18, so 18:18. I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you, Ahab, and your father's family have. You've abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Jezebel's his wife. That's at the palace table. That's at, whether he eats separately from his wife or whether you can make all those seminary, you can shave the hairs off of that fly as much as you want to. But in reality, there's 850 prophets that have been eating at the king's table, and you're imagining it's a beautiful table. It's highly decorated. It's in a beautiful place called a palace. It has whatever AC and heat or whatever. It didn't, but you know what I mean. It's that kind of every technological advancement is there. All the people who are somebody are all there. And they get to be there with the king and the queen all the time and eat all this really good food. So what is Elijah, as this obedient man of God, had over the last few years? So it's for him, he would be sitting there and be upset because of this if he is living a life where he's comparing his ministry to the ministry of others around him, right? So that is what we're trying to figure out tonight is what do we do when this is getting thrown in our face? He didn't ask for it. God told him to go back to see Ahab. When he gets there, there's 850 prophets sitting at the king's table eating all this really good food and have been for years, and he's just been put through the ringer. So I'm getting ready to go to my 40th high school reunion, and there's a bunch of people who have reunions this year, different ones. Some friends are going to their 50th, that kind of stuff. And when you go, you talk about having stuff thrown in your face. There's, 90% of the people that I'll see have just been, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And it's just this wonderful time. And then there's, another 5%, that won't show up. And then 5% that'll sit there and they want to take out, they go, let me show you my portfolio. I want to show you how my stocks have performed over the last 50 years. And I want to show you, and this is what my kids have done and where they've graduated from and their GPAs. And let me show you this. This is what they're, where they're working now. And this is what their 401k says right now. And then I want to show you, and it's just this putting it in your face kind of deal. And so if you've done lots of good stuff and you have lots of achievements, then, you might want to share that with everybody. And then I want to get some of those hillbilly teeth and just put them in and go, walk in and go, I haven't done nothing, that kind of thing. And, Jill's like, you would do something like that, you moron. But so we have situations like that where it gets thrown in our face. Selah, where she went to elementary school, was where Jill taught school. She was able to go there because Jill was a teacher there. And it's a great school, great education. But when it came time for like spring break, they would be going, Selah, where are you going on spring break? And Selah would be like, I think I'm going to my bedroom and maybe my living room, maybe our den and the backyard and the neighborhood. And they're going, oh, well, we're going to Rome, or we're going to Paris, or we're going to Tahiti, or my family's going to climb Mount Everest or whatever. And it was this. And I was like, whoa. And Selah was just like, Dad, where are we going for spring break? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where we're going for spring break. So we'll have to work on that, right? And then, but, my sons both went to private school, two oldest sons. And, they were, very first week they were there, you get your parking pass and they would pull in and come home and say, Dad, there's a Mercedes parked on one side of me and there's a Porsche on the other side of me. And I can remember Noah coming home and go, there's a brand spanking new, still has this Porsche, the sticker on the window, Dodge Challenger that I'm parked next to that a 16-year-old is driving to school. And, of course, my kids are driving the old 98 Ford Ranger to school because when they're 16, there's no way I'm putting them in a nice car because they run into everything in the world and scratch it up, bang it up. But it was thrown in their face, this idea of, look at what everybody else has. And you could see that in the Old Testament with Abraham and his two wives, Sarah and Hagar, because Hagar had a child and Sarah didn't. Well, the first problem in all of that is the precursor to that is we have to make some tough decisions of, why am I having two wives? That sets me up for these two people, this dichotomous relationship where they're two, entities that are opposed and against one another rather than all one family. And there was trouble, right? You have Joseph and his brothers. So there's all of these, boys and the dad is saying, I like Joseph a lot. He's like me, or he's my favorite, or whatever. You get this nice coat. You don't have to work. And oh, by the way, I want you to spy on your brothers and tell me if they're loafing or not. And so, he's out there spying and telling dad and all this kind of stuff. And the brothers start looking around and they're like, okay, he's got this Technicolor Dreamcoat thing that he's wearing, and we don't have one of those. And he gets to stay at the house all day, and I don't see him with a shovel in his hand, and he's not out in the heat. And by the way, he's a fink. He's telling dad all the stuff that we're doing that's wrong or whatever. You get the point. Is that this comparing, my brother and sister, how they're treated by my parents. That can be troublesome. That comparing thing draws up these feelings of jealousy and envy, and really brings up anger into our lives, because anger is that tool we use to get what we want at times. It's one of those things, a motivator. It is, one of the things that really inspires us to do terrible, awful things and stupid things at times. So you have Hannah and Peninnah and Elkanah, another situation where one wife can have kids and the other one can't. And there's the mocking going on of, I can have children and you can't. I mean, that kind of thing, such middle school things, but it is something that goes on in our families at times. And so, ushering that up, another example straight out of the Bible. And so we have to figure out, okay, so how am I going to adjust this? How am I going to make some changes in my life that'll help me in terms of dealing with these things? And one of those things I think is change of mindset, right? And we have to start seeing things differently. We have to start figuring out what's important, and then that will help direct us, right? So, Jesus is real upfront with us about, top priority, right? Seek ye first. We're talking about Matthew chapter 6, and it's like verse 33 and 34. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. And that's not a bag of gold, right? That's not what he's talking about. If you follow me, you get your bag of gold, and you'll have all this wonderful, all your wants taken care of. The old, all your dreams will come true from Napoleon Dynamite, right? If you vote for me. That's not that. It is actually, for us, that the top priority in our life has to be God, and we have to see him as the best thing of value in our lives. It is that God is, our relationship with him it's the most valuable thing that we have. Not just because he gets us into heaven. There's this idea of, do we worship God because he gave us this gift, or do we worship him because of what motivated him to give us this gift, which is his love? That somebody so benevolent, somebody so awesome that would lay down his life for us, send his own son down here to die on the cross for us, take our punishment, take our sin and all that. So as we move along, just that idea of seek ye first. Then the second one would be, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So whatever you put value in, and some of you would argue with me, I don't put value in anything, it has value, and you go, no, that's not true, because that I have shown you the picture on video. There was a painting that sold, and it's not been more than 15 years ago, and it was about 6 feet tall painting, about 3.5, 4 feet wide, and it was a giant yellow block on the top, bright yellow, and on the bottom it was a giant blue block. So it was just a big rectangle with a yellow square and a blue square. Sold for $47 million. Because of who painted it. Not because of what it looked like, because it was just a blue block and a yellow block, right? So, and that fits in nobody's head except somebody who's got gazillions of dollars. Somebody's got a kajillion and they want to look around and go, ooh, that was painted by Picasso, right? And you look at it and you go, it looks like it was painted by Picasso's kid in kindergarten is what it looks like, right? And yet they go, oh man, it's of such great value. And you go, you do know who Picasso was, right? That he was a drunk that hung out in bars and he drew on napkins and on placemats so that he could pay his bar tab. That's who Picasso was. And you go, oh, I've got a Picasso on the wall. Look at that. It's treasure, that kind of thing. And the Bible's real upfront with us to say where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So if your kid goes over there and knocks it off the wall, you're going to hurt your kid for knocking off the scribble that Picasso did at the bar. So does that make sense to us? No, it doesn't make sense. And in God's eyes, doesn't make sense. So we have to make sure where our treasure is, there our heart is also. So, and then to step back and just think for just a minute, and it's a kind of a filter that has to happen in our heads, is to go, why are we caring so much what other people think? What's the purpose of that? And I think it's easy if you start looking at both sides. One is, I actually want to fit in. Okay, so the opposite of that, I don't want to stand out. I want to fit in with the people around me. I don't want to stand out. So I want to be included, don't want to be excluded, right? And I want to be part of the group. I don't want to be alone. And this is the motivator. This is what's pushing all of this, why we care so much about what other people think. I want to be loved, not invisible and unloved. I want to be, we have this thing about wanting to be admired, wanted to be, I've heard women say that I went to school with, that, they want to walk into a room and have every man in there want them. They don't want to have an adulterous affair. They don't want even to have anything to do with those guys. They just want them to want them because it makes them feel good. It builds that they want me, that it's this self-esteem builder. And you go, yeah, that's kind of lame. I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. And actually is a very shallow way of going about life. If we're just totally concerned about what other people think. And, Jesus makes a statement and he's talking about, sharing your faith and following God and being obedient to him. And he says things like, you got to be obedient to me no matter what the authorities are going to do to you. And he says the words, don't worry about what people will do to you. Worry about what God will do to you. And that's a negative example, but he's saying, don't worry about what people think. Worry about what God thinks. That's what he's trying to get across to us about what's important, is that the eternal is much more important than the temporal. Well, let me give you an example. So how much do you work on your relationship with Jesus every day? Now, we're not talking about Sunday. We're talking about any day during the 7 days, of the week. How hard do you work on those things? Well, Chris Caldwell, because of what I was taught by great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and, that kind of thing, is one of the things that I'm responsible for doing at my house is I'm supposed to, and I wrote them all down. I wanted to make sure that I laid it out for you. And this is, Jill's going to think that I'm doing this on purpose for some reason or whatever. But the idea that how much time do I spend mowing the grass, weed eating the grass, weeding the flower beds, picking up sticks from the trees, trimming trees and bushes, picking that stuff up. How much time watering and fertilizing? I'm just talking about grass. That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about farming. We're not talking about growing food for us or for our families or for, other people or anything. We're just talking about the grass cutting stuff. How much time do you spend doing all this? And all of my friends who, would all be saying, preach on, brother, preach on. What do we do? Because we spend a great deal of the week doing those things which really don't matter at all. Zero. What's the purpose of mowing grass? Now, y'all are sitting here and everybody's going, Chris is mad because his grass is high and he can't get it mowed because of the rain or whatever, VBS. No. I'm just saying, what's the purpose of that? Because in reality, I got done the other night with everything. It looked pristine. And it took me hours and hours. And I got done. I went in to Jill and I said, look at the lawn. And she patted me on the back. She went, good boy, way to go, good boy. She didn't say it that way, but that's kind of the way, I'm looking for the pat on the back. Look at how good it looks, And we live on 19 acres. that's blocked by trees from the road, no one will ever see our grass unless you come over to our house. So no one's ever going to see the grass unless we have visitors come to our house. But I'm spending hours a week doing it because I was trained in that was what it was important and of value, that you have this house and everything looks nice. But the idea behind grass cutting really goes back hundreds of years ago to you cut your grass so that you could see the wild animals that were approaching or the poisonous snakes as you walked across your land. So there's not much reason for us to do it now unless, and you get the point of what is of value and how much time am I spending. And it's that for most of us is a lot more time than we spend at church or in Bible study or whatever it might be, right? In prayer. So, we sit here and, we're trying to be able to, figure out what is important. And I'm still looking at the idea of, my relatives. And so if I'm going to do all of that mowing and all of that, why am I doing it? And if the only reason I'm doing it is because my neighbors will look at it or the people that drive by go, really nice neighborhood, really nice house, man. Look at the care. Look at the skill of growing grass that looks like that. Or the flowers in that flower bed are just amazing. Or those tree limbs. There's not a limb on the ground anywhere, and everything's pruned and trimmed and blah, blah, blah. That's about what people think. And all that time I could have spent going to my kids' ball games, throwing ball with them in the yard, helping them with their homework, going somewhere and getting ice cream or taking them fishing or something like that, rather than spending all that time just to get a pat on the back from whoever. We've got to get those values in order. And that's one of the ways that the Bible and our time with God each day is He wants us to shuffle those things. He's constantly wanting us to shuffle those things because, we get things out of order at times. So, okay, so let's talk about, we talked about being off the grid, but let's talk about just some real quick little action steps. One of the things that there used to be a show on TV, and you can see the gray hair right here, right? Because I'm going to talk about lifestyles of the rich and famous. Or maybe we'll come a few years further down and we'll talk about the show Cribs or something like that. Still, we have shows like that. That show us, and HGTV is absolutely the worst at this point in terms of House Hunters or some of those shows, fixing up mansions and, My Lottery Dream Homes and those kind of things. It's that you see what others have and it makes you dissatisfied with what you have. So social media and the media around us in general, just in terms of TV and all of those things, magazines, all of that contributes. So we got to kind of limit those things. And when I say that, some people will go, oh no, we're burning our records now to keep Satan out, right? Actually, it does help in terms of us not seeing all of that stuff that's out there because, if you don't have $1 billion, some of that stuff's impossible. Some of that stuff will never be something. It's kind of like walking through Biltmore and actually going, we should have done this with our place, right? No, that's not, it's not a realistic thing, but it does make us dissatisfied when we go, how come we don't have a room with an orchestra in it? Man, that doesn't make any sense, those kinds of things that are out there. So the opposite of that is all the time that we spend on our phones and on social media and on our computers or whatever. We could, do the idle hands thing, which is, we've all heard that idle hands give you more time to do the devil's handiwork, that old cliche. It's not biblical, but it is. The concept is that we need to be busy, not busy bodies. We need to be busy and at work for the Lord and doing the things that grow us. And I do want to say this, and I don't want you to take it the wrong way. We need to be making our future. So that means learning, that means growing, that means, and I love the old Thomas Jefferson quote where he is like, a lot of people look at me and they go, what a lucky man you are. And he goes, what I've found is the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have. Is that, how do we spend our time? What is of value in our, if all we're promised is this 24 hours, how are we going to spend it? And if we're spending it watching cat videos, our brains are going to mush and we wonder why. I need a doctor's appointment to go get my brain checked. No, you just need to get off of, start shifting that focus of the value, the things that that I need is to learn and grow and to know Jesus better, but then also to do my job better, or to get a new career, or to educate myself and get another degree, or to, work on my relationship with my wife, or work on my relationship with my kids, which, some people tend to think marriage is just something that kind of poof happens, this really good marriage. And it takes a great deal of work and great deal of skill. There's lots of books to be read, a lot of counseling and those kind of things. Same with parenting. Those are skills that you learn. Not just, they don't just like osmosis, this doesn't sink into you because you sleep on a pillow at night and it just kind of pours in your ears. It takes effort. And so those are the things that I'm talking about in terms of that. And I'll give James Upshaw some credit, is that, he works diligently at a job and then comes home and he coaches his daughter in t-ball. And, some of the other things that are out there, you got Sandy, who takes her kids and they participate with Jason in Boy Scouts. They participate in dance. They participate in learning piano skills. I mean, all those things are important. And you heard me say that, when my mom got divorced, I had such a terrible dad. When she got remarried to my stepdad, the first thing they did was got me involved in like 50 different extracurricular activities, so that I didn't have time to sit around and be depressed, or sit around and have time to be angry and act out as I was getting, learning these things. Part of that issue is that you become mediocre at a lot of things as opposed to focusing in. So make sure that you are, whatever your kid enjoys, focus on that. Don't keep them so busy that all they do is just run from place to place to place. But that does keep them out of trouble. So I'm not trying to get off gear there. The last one that I'll give you, is just to finish up, is the idea of just be careful chasing the dollar. Because of what I shared on Sunday, is that, Dietrich Bonhoeffer's father was a wealthy man and lost all of his money when Germany lost World War I. He was like really wealthy. The next day he was not really wealthy. He was broke, poor the next day. It can change that fast. And the dollars that we have aren't worth the ink they're printed on. So it's not like we're hoarding gold in our basement or something like that. But just be careful, because the Bible's got a couple, when Jesus is real clear, when the guy comes and he goes, "Hey, what commandment should I be following? Is there one that's more important than any of the others?" And Jesus lays it out. And that's when he says, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the guy basically, and Jesus is laying them all out, and the guy goes, I've done all those. Is there anything else? And Jesus looks at the guy and he goes, yeah, sell all your stuff and give to the poor. And the guy goes, what? My valuables? Sell my valuables? Right? I mean, it is that, and give it away. He's being upfront, and that's not what he's telling everybody to do. He's telling that guy because that was his issue. His issue was greed. His issue was that the dollar had become, and that's what for them wasn't a dollar then. It was whatever, denarius or whatever, they used as a form of exchange. Could have been shells for all I know, but it's just shiny rocks and minerals out of the ground, right? It's all it is, paper that they've printed on. And so for us to give it such value and such control over our lives, Jesus is like, no, watch out, for that, because that gets in you and it changes who you are and it changes all your motivations. And so I would, just say to you, be careful chasing the dollar. So for us, when we're sitting here, and in all of these stories, looking at comparing, looking at what other people, the last thing that I'll leave you with is that we tend to look at the neighbors in our neighborhood or our, the people at work or whatever, and just think you have about less than 5% of the total information about them and their family. 95% of it is unknown to you. So for you to say, what a great marriage they have. Wish I had that marriage. What a great parent they are. Wish I was that kind of parent. Wow, what a house. I wish I had that house. Jill and I had a friend who was a mortgage broker, and when all the foreclosures happened in 2008, there were so many people. She said she went to homes and those homes had no furniture in them. People were just paying they weren't even paying principal. They were just paying the interest on their house and had just whole sections of their house that had no furniture in them whatsoever, just to say that they had a house that was such and such big and all of that. And that's the danger. That's the trap that we fall into that gets us so far off track. And comparing just steals that satisfaction out from under us. All right. God bless you. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for joining us tonight.